building and sustainable development around the world and across Africa. Our first theme for this year is the Intercultural Competence Imperative. And our speaker is Dr. Darla Deardorff. Dr. Deardorff is the chairholder of the UNESCO Chair on Intercultural Competence at Stellenbosch University, South Africa, as well as a research scholar at Duke University, North Carolina, USA. It is a great honor and pleasure having you with us today, Darla Deardorff. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Darla Deardorff. It's also a pleasure seeing you all today. Again, thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to join you all, and I'm hoping to be able to join in future meetings as well. I'm very excited about this group. Thank you, and thank you so much for the invitation to share with you about the Intercultural Competence Imperative. And it's wonderful to meet you all. I see a few names I recognize, Luciana and Milton. Great to see you here, and I'm looking forward to learning from and connecting with the rest of you who are here too. So thank you so much for joining. So as you heard, I'm the UNESCO Chair on Intercultural Competence at Stellenbosch University, and I am based partly there and partly in the US. So I spend usually one semester there and then the other here. I am in the US right now, and so I'm really excited about this particular UNESCO chair because we're focusing on the intersections of intercultural competence with peace building, with climate, and with gender. And this is our core team. So while I'm the chair holder, we also have co-chairs. Dr. Precious Simba is based at Stellenbosch also, originally from Zimbabwe, and Dr. Divinia Jitu is the other co-chair. She's actually at Durban University of Technology. And then we have other core team members that you see listed there. And then in addition, we work with our partners around the continent and around the world. And you see the contact information as well as the website there. I especially want to draw attention. So any UNESCO chair, there are about 1,000 around the world in various areas. This is the only one that's in intercultural competence, although there are UNESCO chairs in peace education, in global citizenship and other related areas. Any UNESCO chair is mandated to do two things. One is research and one is capacity building. The capacity building for our UNESCO chair on intercultural competence is what you see here. We've been actively involved in UNESCO story circles. So our chair is the main one that takes UNESCO story circles out across the continent and the world. I mean, for example, last week I was in Japan running UNESCO story circles. And at the end of this month, I'll be at UNESCO Paris headquarters running UNESCO story circles. So it's an amazing intercultural methodology that we run in groups of 4 to 6 people, which means it's very scalable. So I've done this with several hundred, both online and in person. And all of it is available in an open access manual that you'll see there, the link. And that manual is available in at least 6 different languages. So encourage you to download that, have a look at it, and please contact us if you have questions. But it takes about 90 minutes to run a UNESCO story circle, and the outcomes far exceed what we see in a half to full day intercultural training. I also have some invitations for you before we get started. I want to invite all of you to our next intercultural conference. So our UNESCO chair is really keen to identify and elevate African voices on intercultural competence. And one of the ways we're doing that is through these conferences that we're moving around the continent. So this past year, we had our inaugural conference in Nairobi. This coming year, as you see, we're going to be in Rabat, Morocco, um, at the end of September, 1st of October. And the call for proposals will come out very soon. And we would welcome any submissions to this conference and welcome all of you to please come and participate in this conference, UNESCO Chair Intercultural Conference in Rabat. We will be doing also a story circle training there. We always have that as part of our conferences. In addition, one of the partners to the UNESCO Chair is called the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence, and there's a virtual annual global forum that's coming up sooner online on the 22nd to 24th of April, and would welcome all of you to be part of that. And there are poster submissions that are due on 24th of February. Luciana, who is on this call, is also involved with this in case you have questions, and we would welcome poster submissions to that. And the last invitation for you is to join the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence if you have interest in this topic. It is totally free membership, all volunteer run. There are over 5,000 colleagues from around the world engaged in 20-some different working groups on intercultural and global competence, including an ICC, Intercultural Competence in Africa working group. There's also an ICC in MENA working group. There's one in French. There's one in Spanish. So lots of different possibilities for ways to continue the work and learning around this topic that I'll be sharing with you on today. So, so thank you for letting me share those invitations with you, and looking forward to engaging with you further in a number of different ways, as I just mentioned. So for today, I want to just take a little bit of time, explore with you what we mean by intercultural competence, and then after that have a discussion so that I'll share just a little bit, and then really looking forward to the discussion that we will have. So as we begin, I want to take a moment to step back, and there's so much happening in the world. Much of it we don't even hear about. And we've all been through so much in the last 5 years. So within that context of thinking about all that is happening, I want to pose a question to you, and it's what you see here. What is necessary for us to get along together as humans on this planet that we share? What is necessary for us to get along together as humans? This is the burning question that has driven me in all of the research that I've ever done. And perhaps you have a burning question that you will never cease to stop exploring. This is my burning question. In academia, in universities, this is known as intercultural competence, looking at how we get along together. And there are a number of different frameworks available. You'll see a few of those listed here. Council of Europe has been working on this construct for quite a number of years, and you'll see the framework from them listed here. OECD has a framework on global competence. I was actually one of 4 experts involved in working with the OECD on global competence PISA, the test that they gave to 15-year-olds around the world in 2018. Michael Byron's work has been used for many years in Europe. And then I'm going to go into more detail about the first research-based framework on intercultural competence, which is coming out of the research I've done, noting that there has been over 60 years of scholarly work done on this construct, that there are over 30 different terms in English for what we're talking about, depends on your discipline, on the context. Social work and healthcare often refer to cultural competence, but increasingly in healthcare, there's much more focus on cultural humility. which is coming into other disciplines as well. The business world has its own researchers and a whole body of work around something that is called cultural intelligence. Um, in education, and that tends to be my field, there are many different terms used for this. Yes, intercultural competence, but then usually at the primary, secondary levels, the term tends to be global competence. But there's also terms such as global citizenship, global learning, many different terms. In Japan, where I just was, it was intercultural collaborative learning. Yeah, so there's a wide range. But when we start saying, okay, but what do you mean by the term you're using? It you start to hear very similar dimensions. So competence is defined as knowledge, skills, and attitudes. That's a basic definition of competence. And as I mentioned, this is one of the first research-based frameworks, and it's same dimensions, different ways of looking at it, because it's difficult for any visual framework to capture um, the complexity. And so let me share with you then a bit about what this looks like. And it's important to note that in the end, intercultural competence starts with us. And so because that's so important that we reflect on our own, kind of where we're at, our own intercultural journey, I have included some self-reflection questions as we go through this. So I mentioned knowledge, skills, and attitudes. And these are the three key attitudes that emerge from the research as being absolutely essential to intercultural competence. Respect, and that is the cornerstone of a lot of the United Nations work. Respect, of valuing each other as fellow humans, especially those who don't think like we do or look like we do. Second is openness, open-mindedness. And the third is curiosity, of really wanting to learn more about each other. So with those in mind, here are some questions for us to consider. How truly open are we to those from diverse backgrounds? Do we make quick assumptions about others? Do we measure others' behavior based on our culturally conditioned mores? How do we show we value those from other backgrounds? Do we make an effort to learn more about others? And do we stay curious? The knowledge areas have to do a lot with cultural self-awareness, sociolinguistic awareness, some deeper understandings about others' worldviews, which actually is the only aspect that the experts I worked with could agree on as being absolutely critical to intercultural competence, is being able to see from others' worldviews. But that's really tough to do because we are so culturally conditioned to see the world through our own lens and experience. So here are some questions for knowledge. Can we describe our own identity and cultural conditioning? I have worked with students in the United States who say that the US doesn't have a culture. Other places do, but the US doesn't. And I will say, well, have you had a chance to be outside of the US culture? And the answer is almost always no, I've never left the United States. So yeah, even this one question can be hard for some. Can we describe our own identity and our own cultural conditioning, including values? Can we describe our own worldviews, others' worldviews? And how much do we really know about others' cultural backgrounds and worldviews? Skills are absolutely essential to intercultural competence. In fact, this is what most people think about when they think about competence, intercultural competence. But these are actually not too specific to interacting with those who are different from us. And the most important one is around listening. And that's what the UNESCO Story Circles focuses on. Listening for understanding instead of listening for response or judgment. And as humans, we tend just naturally to listen for response or judgment. Do I agree with what the person's saying or not? And we far too infrequently listen for understanding, which means we're really focusing on the other person who's speaking, and we're giving ourselves fully to listening to what they're saying, how they're saying it, and blocking out distractions that come into our mind or that are around us as the person is speaking. So it's a lot harder to do than we might think to practice that listening for understanding. So the questions are, to what extent do I practice listening for understanding as opposed to response or judgment? Because when we're listening for response or judgment, it's more about how will I respond to you? What is my opinion of what you're saying? I'm really focused much more on myself, right? Do we engage in active reflection following interactions that we have? What went well? What could be improved? What could I do to understand others better? Do we really focus on the seeking to understand first, as opposed to jumping to conclusions or assumptions? And do we evaluate interactions and situations from multiple perspectives, not just our own? So I've covered briefly the knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed for intercultural competence. And then together, and that adds up to what happens inside ourselves, and then ultimately our interactions with each other. So this desired internal outcome means that we ideally will have more flexibility, more adaptability, a greater degree of empathy as we interact with each other. And that can lead to these questions. Are we aware of how we communicate, the styles? Not, oh, I like to use Instagram. No. But for example, are we more direct in our communication or indirect? Do we tend to use emotion when we communicate or not? These are all culturally conditioned ways to communicate. And then do we try to adapt our styles to others, or do we say, this is the way I communicate, take it or leave it? Which is not very interculturally competent to say. And then are we able to kind of use appropriate ways to communicate with others? And how do we demonstrate that empathy for each other in culturally appropriate ways? If you want a short definition of intercultural competence, this is it. But as you can see, it's much more complex than just what you see here. But if someone were to ask you, what is intercultural competence? It is behavior and communication that is both effective and appropriate across difference. And the key words are effective and appropriate. And you might think of a lot of people who can be effective in what they do. They meet their goals, but they might be totally inappropriate in how they go about meeting their goals. Effectiveness is only half of the picture for intercultural competence. The other half of the picture is appropriateness. Have we interacted and behaved in ways that are appropriate to those who are in the interaction, not just to ourselves? So putting those into an actual framework, this is what it looks like. The same elements I just talked about are in both. But again, it's difficult for any framework to capture reality. So the one that looks like a pyramid was the first one developed, but that implies that there's a point at which we become interculturally competent. And that wasn't fitting with the research. So that's where you see the process model with the arrows, showing that this is a lifelong process. There's no point at which any of us become interculturally competent. And just because we might be fluent in a language of another culture doesn't make us interculturally competent. In fact, the experts in the study could not reach consensus on the role of language in intercultural competence because they said they knew too many cases of fluent fools, of those who knew vocabulary and grammar of another language, but were interculturally incompetent in navigating within the culture. And that can be true even for those of us with our original languages, right? So lifelong journey. And this has real implications in a number of different aspects. One is when it comes to assessing intercultural competence, and I've done a lot of research on assessment. Yes, it can be assessed, but it's important to understand that this is a lifelong journey. So it's more about the process than an end destination, because there is no end destination. It also means for educators that oftentimes students may be further along in their intercultural journeys than the educators. And that has some real implications too. So many implications for this. You can find what I've talked about today. You can find it at that link that you see there. You can download those models. And they've also been published many different places in different books. Now, as I have alluded to already, there are limitations with any research and with any framework. One of the limitations of this research is that the majority of the experts involved in this study were located in the global north, most of them in North America. So one could argue that what I just shared with you is quite a global north perspective on intercultural competence. And as I mentioned earlier, the only aspect that these experts agreed on 100% as being essential to intercultural competence was being able to see from others' perspectives, other worldviews. So that has become my burning question also. What are other perspectives on intercultural competence? And that's also why I'm so excited about this UNESCO chair on intercultural competence being based at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, because it's about understanding and exploring and learning more about other perspectives on intercultural competence. And one of our co-chairs, Dr. Precious Simba, is doing a lot of work and research on Ubuntu and publishing on what Ubuntu has to say about intercultural competence, about getting along together as humans, coming back to that question. Ubuntu as a South African humanistic philosophy, even a way of life of I am because we are because I am. What we do impacts each other, and we cannot separate the individual from we, which is very different than what I just shared with you, which was very individual focused, knowledge, skills, and attitudes of the individual. In South American contexts, we're learning more about a concept called buen vivir, which is looking at the interconnectedness of all living beings, including in the natural world. Again, quite different than what I just shared with you. And one of the threads that we're seeing from some of the different perspectives is much more of a relationship focused, being much more relationship focused, which I think has real implications then also in peace building. And I would love to hear more of your thoughts on that. Some of this is what I've just shared with you is captured in this downloadable publication that you see there from UNESCO, trying to look at what are different concepts around the world that we can learn from, learn more about for taking it local. So then that brings me to the question for all of us today that I'd love to discuss together. What are the intersections then of intercultural competence with peace building? So I will stop there and turn it back over to George. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we thank you so much, Darla, for this wonderful presentation, quite thought-provoking, and there is a question before us to discuss. We are all welcome to begin reflecting on the intersection between intercultural competence and peace building. Where do they intersect? This is really a great question for us to reflect upon. So who would like to begin? Yes, please. Would you like to start, Janet?
Yes. Hello.
Excellent.
I
Hello.
so appreciated your presentation, Darla. I'm the education director of the International Institute on Peace Education. And I was just speaking to someone from Korea who was discussing how people don't feel the need to move outside their organization, like the religious organization compared to the government, compared to civil society. And how do you build civil society? And especially, it's pretty obvious in the United States at the moment that we're in super bad shape if we don't, really bond together as civil society and global civil society. But let's see, do I have a question? And I'm working on I really loved your Ubuntu, Buen Vivir, and relational focused model. Because I'm working on it, I'm thinking that peace building also has to have a real ecological relational component. It's not just violence, but how do we recognize our relationship to the environment that we depend on? And so I think your work is so central. And yeah, so I guess, couldn't you say more about your cutting edge questions? Like, these are the questions for all of us. And where's the cutting edge for you? You implied it a bit, but anyway, thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and it's really nice to connect with you. And for the UNESCO chair, we really are keen. The cutting edge is looking at the intersections, and this question I posed to all of you. This is like where we're at right now. What are the intersections of intercultural competence with peace building? I don't know as much about peace education. I know some, but not as much. And from what I understand, there's not been quite that emphasis on the intercultural competence in peace education. But I'd love to learn more. And what's interesting to me is that about 2 years ago, UNESCO also wanted to explore this question of the intersections of peace building and intercultural competence. This was right as our chair was getting launched. They tried to identify experts around the world. They wanted to do virtual regional consultations like we're doing here um, in each region around the world, and they tried to identify experts who could speak to the intersections of peace building and intercultural competence. And guess what? It was really hard for them to find and identify experts. They could find ones in peace, they could find ones in intercultural, but they couldn't find it was hard to find experts who were working at the interface of both. They did eventually find people who could at least be part of the consultation, but it's an area that needs a lot more research and work. And that's why I'm so excited about all of you being here today and helping push this forward more to see what do we think are the intersections? What is that interface between peace and intercultural competence?
Well, can I just add that makes a lot of sense? On the other hand, I've been working on it since 1995, and so all these people are working on it. So to refine the question a bit, who's doing research and writing it up might be a large part of the gap.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Yeah, that's good.
So thank you. Thank you.
And I see we have other questions. Yeah.
Yes, we do. I can see Laid and then Richard. Nice to see you both. Nice to see everyone here. Thank you, Janet, for your intervention.
Thank you, George. Thank you, everyone. I'm very pleased to be back to this forum, which I feel really very interesting and exciting. Thank you, Darla, for your expose. But let me a little bit skeptical about your approach. Do you think we live in country of forgiveness, in the world, sorry, of forgiveness. Right now, what we see all around the world, your approach is so idealistic, is so realistic. We cannot at all implement on the ground because so many conflicts around the world, so many crises and so forth, so many unforgiveness. So I don't know which part of the world do you live or which planet do you live, because all what we have said is quite okay, but still it's a theoretical approach. Thank you very much, Darla.
Yeah, thank you so much. Absolutely. It can seem, and a lot of the work to date has been quite theoretical. Absolutely. And so what the UNESCO chair is trying to do is to say, what does this really look like on the ground? What does this really mean? Let's take it out of the theory. What does this really look like? And I'm really excited about where the research can go around Ubuntu, for example. And I'm mindful of Desmond Tutu's work. He was the one who really pushed forward Ubuntu in the work of reconciliation, truth and reconciliation in South Africa. And he was a huge proponent of forgiveness. And he said that is the most important piece. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Prof. And I think there's a lot more to do on this. I'm also mindful of the work of Martin Luther King Jr., who believed that beloved community was possible, where all can thrive, where there is no more poverty or hunger. He believed we could achieve that. It's a tall order, but he believed that that could happen through beloved community. And of course, in the US, we are very far ways away from that in the current situation. But it's maybe something we can strive toward.
Excellent, excellent. Richard?
Yes, yes. I'm so grateful. Good afternoon from Ghana.
Afternoon to you.
Yes. With the letter that I have with respect to interculture or intercultural competence and peace building, I realize when these two intersect or meet, there is understanding and there is the possibility to navigate many cultures. With this, resolving conflicts and building sustainable peace is so easy. That is one thing I've seen. With what is this? I think one need to work harmoniously with the other, and one need to have empathy. One needs to be kind as well before it can be real. So this is a letter that I gained from the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your words about the sustainable peace and with empathy and I see that Milton has his hand up and I'm really an admirer of Milton's work on positive peace. So Milton, I don't know if you'd like to step in also here and share with us.
Thank you very much, Darla. Good to see you. Good to see you, George, and other colleagues from all over the world. I think the first thing I need to say is how outstanding Darla's work is. Having seen it very up close in my previous role as director for the Institute for Economics and Peace Africa office. I had a chance to visit at Stellenbosch University. I had a chance to attend the inaugural Intercultural Competence workshop, and it was all amazing. I think the first thing that we tried to do was blend the approaches, which is intercultural competence and positive peace. And I think there's a lot of work that can go into that. And I think a very simple and direct way that can be done is using intercultural dialogue as a peace building tool in context where there's ongoing conflict. one of the very powerful things that happens there is that you sit together with someone in a cone of confidentiality, in a cone of openness and trust, and you talk about things that only the two of you will ever know. You don't discuss it when you're debriefing afterwards. You don't talk about it with anyone else later on. You commit yourself to this cone of confidentiality, this cone of trust. And I think having that as part of dialogue processes in instances where there's conflict opens up the possibility of people on different sides of the conflict coming to a realization that this is a person like I'm a person. They have struggles and fears. This is what they are trying to say that I'm not hearing. This is what I'm trying to say that maybe I could articulate better. So I think that's one clear way where peace building and intercultural competence and intercultural dialogue can come together. I literally have so many more things to say, but for now, I think I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Milton. It's great to see you again here. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for sharing your insights on dialogue, the role of dialogue, and the importance of seeing each other's humanity. That is so, so important. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Evelyn, yeah?
Yeah, please, let's proceed.
Thank you very much. I always sing the same song, which is I'm so grateful to this platform for the expertise because it feeds us all. I'd like to say a personal thank you to George, whom I had the privilege of meeting in person in Tanzania. And George, I don't know if you can see it. I'm wearing your wonderful T-shirt from your university, which gives me strength. Anyway, enough of the personal.
Thank you so much.
I'm really, really fascinated by this exchange, and I hope everyone will forgive me if I spoke about peace professionalism the last time, but I want to explain, Darla, that I'm part of a group that is exploring the concept of peace professionalism and going beyond skills to values. Now, when I hear you, I mean, the constant refrain, and by the way, we have partners that are based in Latin America, Africa, Europe, and Asia. So we are trying to make sure that it's not just the global north. I'm always fascinated with the inherent apparent contradiction between the need for the otherness of Ubuntu or the togetherness of Ubuntu and the responsibility of the individual. And so in this context, if I take what you, and by the way, in terms of how we are defining the peace professional, we're defining them in terms of they work from the head, the heart, the hands, and the feet. And the concept is that it goes beyond the skills, the values, and cultural competence is coming up increasingly in our discussions as one of the values of a peace professional. As you say, there are many ways of expressing it, but I won't take up very much more time, but I would love to talk to you at some point about what we are doing and how maybe what you are doing can feed into this discussion about how do you capture that when you are trying to define peace professionalism in the context of what is it that empowers individual to be the most competent, effective, decolonized, inclusive peace builder in the world. So with your permission, at first I would love your reaction to what I've said, but I would also love to be able to follow up on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to hear and learn more about peace professionalism. And I love what you said about beyond skills to values. And then also it seems like in the end, it's about action. Like what are the actions? And that's where we're going also with intercultural competence, regardless of how we're looking at that, whether it's through which lens. In the end, it's about action. And what does that look like? So I would welcome also reaching out. I have put my contact information in the chat. It's a little further up now. But also I'm on LinkedIn, and that's a good way to connect with me as well. So thank you.
Excellent. Shall we now turn to Ayo and then Mary? Ayo, you are welcome.
Thank you and good afternoon. Thanks for that presentation too. Yes, I want to talk more about the action part. Looking at the state of the world, yes, theory is important. It gives us the ability to question, especially question the world around us. We see a whole lot of things that are happening. And also, it also adds understanding and contributes to production of knowledge. But we need to evaluate this thing very well. How do we bring in values beyond the skills, as we have been saying? Looking at what's happening, cultural sensitivity, communication, and perhaps the conflict.
There, you can download that.
Conflict escalating around the world. So how do we translate this into a way of life, not just on paper? We can see that there's a lot going on. I mean, that shows that there's a lot of cultural insensitivity, a lot of even common sense that is not common after all. Take this case of, we're all conflict experts. Most of us are conflict experts. Take the case of the kind of proposal that is being handed over from US to Palestine. I mean, I think that's also part of insensitivity and just disrespect. I feel that we need to think more about how do we translate Ubuntu, how do we translate so many cultural values that we carry around, how do we translate it into reality and a way of life and our communications as well. Thank you.
Oh, I love that question about getting to the action, how to translate this. But for me, what really resonated with what you said is the way of life. How does this become a way of life? And I would welcome anyone else. Please, you are all experts. I would love to hear your thoughts on how do we make this into a way of life. I am mindful of I'm remembering an essay that was written by a famous musician who was born to Chinese parents. He grew up in Paris and then later moved to the US. And he talks about how he felt like a lot of his life he was being forced to choose which culture. But he said they were all part of him. It was too hard to choose whether he was going to be Chinese or French or American. And he said, then he realized that he didn't need to choose, that he was indeed all of them. He embraced all of them. He said they were all part of who he was. And that what he learned from that is that he could go every day toward that which he didn't know, that he could stay curious and continue to learn every day. So that he was speaking more about a way of life. And the musician I'm talking about is Yo-Yo Ma. And yes, Janet, you understood. Yep, that was him. And it's just beautiful. I'm not doing his words justice. It was beautiful how he talked about living a way of life, an intercultural way of life, and how we remain curious and we bring that empathy into all that we do, and being able to see from different perspectives, not just one. And so that's been a challenge that I have go toward. I'm not there yet, but how can we each live an intercultural life? And I so much appreciate your question, Ayo, about how to make this a way of life for all of us. And I would welcome any others, all of you are experts, any others' thoughts on how to make this a way of life. So thank you for bringing it to us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary. And then we go to Odoch. Mary, you are welcome.
Yes. Okay, Chinese Mary. Yeah, it's me. I'm from Beijing. Okay, yeah, nice to meet you, madam. I have a question. Chinese Buddhas wear many clothes, put on many clothes, Buddha sit here. And Christian Adam and Eve are naked in the Garden of Eden. It's a totally different culture, When I do dancing exchange, I'm dancer unit called CID, I will encounter cultural, aesthetic difference, very big shock together. Sometimes I show the beautiful body, a beautiful shape to share the beauty, the pure, but garment tell me it's so ugly because not put the clothes on. I'm crying. I don't know how to deal with this situation. So this question is how to deal with, let the people, Chinese people understand sometimes naked is beautiful, it's pure from heart, from spirit. This is my big problem. I don't know how to show this for them. I'm so sorry.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. And I see you're really resonating with others. Are there others who would like to respond to this beautiful question?
This year, July, I exchanged the Europe people to teach dance in Peking. I faced two problems because I'm the director on the stage. I need the international people to see the Chinese beautiful shape, the girl's beautiful shape. But I'm afraid because the government tell me you can't, you stop because this is ugly. I really want to the people understand the Chinese woman, Chinese girls, beauty, so beautiful, the shapes, but I can't. I'm so sad, This is not art. This is just some purpose for garment. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And the struggles.
Yeah.
Different conceptions around beauty.
Yeah. Only one beauty. It's no more. It's not anything, just beauty.
Right. Right. And those differences unfortunately do exist in terms of what different people consider to be beauty.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing about the struggles you're encountering too.
Thank
Pray
you.
for me. Pray for me.
All right. Let's listen to Odoch. He might also have some ideas about that as well. Odoch, nice to see you.
Unmute me. Hi, George. It's Donna. I just
okay. I see.
off his computer. My computer does not display the icon for raising the hand. And I wanted to say something. Then he also wanted to say something, but he has asked me to speak for each of us. The first is that we are, I am not, I'm not a Nilot. My husband is a Nilot. And wherever Bantus and Nilots interface, wherever we live side by side, I'm considering myself a Nilot because I'm married to one. The Bantus persecute Nilots. We don't get a chance to persecute them. So we find that the term Ubuntu is a Bantu term, and it's a little bit grating on Nilots. And Odoch is proposing the equivalent, which is one Achiel, we are one. You will not hear that from anyone in the Bantu-speaking regions of this world, including South Africa, Central Africa, the Congo Basin, parts of West Africa, and East Africa. But can people just tuck away in your minds that it's offensive to us when people harp on Ubuntu? Because we know that we are not part of Ubuntu. We are excluded from it. I by matrimony, others by birth. Okay, does everybody get that? I hope that's okay. Now, the thing that I wanted to say is that I think in order to develop intercultural competence, we need to learn a little bit more about ourselves. And I think that it would be a good idea for kids in school to learn not just introspection, but some of the findings of introspective exercises. And I'll use myself as an example. I did not know that my tribe insists on developing what we call a logic behind whatever ideas or pronouncements we make. And I didn't know that until I read it in a book. And the book was telling about American culture. I'm an American. And I did not realize until I read it in a book that Americans tend strongly to develop a logic and to explain to people, well, the logic behind this is, or people will ask other people, so what's your logic on that? We're not aware of it. Turkana people here in Kenya are not aware that their entire material culture is based on hyperboloids and hyperbolic paraboloids. And when you tell them that, as I have done many times, they say, oh, wow, I never noticed that before. How did you figure that out? It's right there in front of your eyeballs, okay? So I'm thinking that part of developing intercultural competence is developing introspective or self-analytical competence. And then finally, I'm sorry to keep talking so much. I would like to point out that we need to be talking to intercultural psychotherapists. You bring a Canadian psychotherapist to work with Kikuyus and Maasais and Wakamba. What are they going to do? And we tend also to assume that Kizungu, that white people's models or European culture-based models are the right models. We don't know that. No, I see you thinking. So we need to sort of introduce a cultural neutrality into the way we look at professional things and non-professional things, and also to be a little bit more self-aware. Ask an American, why do we put makeup on dead bodies? They can't answer. I say they, I'm one of them. Okay, now Audrey's telling me to wind up. Okay, I've just put out some ideas for people to fool around with. He wants to say something.
May I continue a little bit?
Yes, please do. Please do.
I cannot see the last slide, so I will just speak from what I can remember was the slide. I would rather have wanted to put the question differently so that we deal with this question I'm thinking about before we even start to look at, yes, intersections of intercultural competence with peace building. I think there is something before. What interferes, in fact, I could even declare that there is, at this particular point, little. Whatever little exists is mostly academic or theoretical, like somebody was saying. So I would have wished to ask first, what prevents vibrant interactions of intercultural competence with peace building? One of the answers is likely to be lack of competence, the way it was presented to us. And one of the things which is probably underlining that lack of competence could include power, whether you call it monetary power, political power, cultural power, and so on, military power. I think those things tend to undermine understanding of competence and, in fact, even using it. This is what I would have wanted to add to your debate. But thank you very, very much for the presentation. I am not an expert, but after listening for a year, I'm beginning to become a good student of this peace building exercise. And I wish everybody a happy new year.
Thank you both so much. Thank you so much for sharing so much that you both shared just now. Starting with, yes, it's so important to understand different perspectives on whatever we're talking about, including Ubuntu, and how that can be perceived and received by others, and who is left out of these different constructs and ideas of getting along together. So I will take these insights back to the UNESCO team as well. Thank you so much for sharing that about who's being excluded from what we're talking about. That's such a key word. And even where you ended here, the last comment about looking at the role of power, power dynamics in all of what we're talking about. I'm also involved in, I've been connected to Duke University, and Duke has a center called the Center for Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation. And the underlying philosophy around that center is, how do we flatten the perceived hierarchies of human value? How do we flatten the perceived hierarchies of human value, which very much speaks to power and oppressive systems that privilege certain peoples over others? So there's a lot of work to be done in all these different areas. And thank you very much to both of you for your insights.
Yeah, excellent. I'd seen Mistru. Mistru, you had your hand up. Or maybe we can turn to Peter, because I don't seem to see Mistru. Peter, please.
Thank you. I wasn't going to say anything, but the last thing you said, I put something in the chat, a reference to A.S. Chan, predatory data, eugenics and big tech in our fight for an independent future. And it seems germane to what you just spoke about, that the exclusion, the colonialism, the separation. Chan raises this question that I haven't seen yet anywhere else, that there is a long-standing eugenics movement which did not die after the Holocaust and has sort of disguised itself in the language of science and technology. And there's her book is dense. You have to parse every paragraph carefully because our language is so embedded with this stuff. Just the way in which we speak affects the way in which we perceive and understand life, which is correlated tightly to our actions. I'll stop there. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And let's turn to Lawrence and then Richard. Lawrence? Lawrence Godfrey? Is that Kamanga?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I'm in Zambia, and I've enjoyed the presentation. Thank you very much to the presenter. However, I belong to the field of education, and one of the things that the government is doing in Zambia is to revise the curriculum to make it more of a competency-based curriculum. I think one of the challenges we have as in creating the Ubuntu or implementation of Ubuntu philosophy in our African societies, particularly here in Zambia, would be the challenge that we are getting from education. Education is also creating a huge challenge in valuing people that have failed through the education the education status, especially those that are in the villages, they are not valued at all. So I don't know how, using the Ubuntu philosophy, how we can help people that have been left behind of the education ladders. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that's such an important question, especially it sounds like as the curriculum is being revised there. And it's interesting to look at the swings of education and the curriculum. The whole competency-based focus is certainly not new. That was even 100 years ago. There was talk around that. And now it looks like and interestingly, it's coming back in a number of different societies and cultures around the world, including here where I am right now, with this so much focus on competency-based. And then it's important that we ask questions about who's being privileged in that, who's being left out, where, looking at where that's coming from. And yeah, there's so much that we could explore around that, as you mentioned. And the realities of how then does that translate for philosophies and other ways of being that are not competency-based, right? Thank you for raising those insights for us.
Lovely. And now Richard and then Miss True.
Yeah. As I put my hand on, I realized those who have spoken were all talking about the education. That was what I wanted to dwell what I have on. Education has been the best. So since ages, education has been the one that has been dealing with different cultures. Therefore, to better get into intercultural, competency, I think schools need to be sensitized on the importance of cultural setting within schools. That is one thing I have in mind.
Great. I think it's important. Really, we don't also have this in our syllabi, in our curricula, intercultural competencies. I think we need it really in our schools, actually, all the way from primary school to university. Then let's turn to Miss True. Welcome, brother. Please unmute. Please unmute, Miss True.
Yes, hello everyone. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I was struggling and to get a very good connection. Thank you, Dr. George and everyone. Just my question is just for the audience. For African sustainable peace and development in Africa, the issues that you bring, peace education, peace research, peace activism, is very essential. And my question is, for African sustainable and peace development, what kind of peace research you do so far? Because in my opinion, more than 30 countries in Africa are now in conflict. So what kind of research you do so far? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so the UNESCO chair, our team is just getting started. It's brand new. And so we would any suggestions of research questions that you see from emerging from the field, from say here's something we don't know, and it would be really helpful if you, the UNESCO chair team, and colleagues could investigate further. So we would welcome that. We also are working, of course, with UNESCO, and they're focused quite a bit around how to address hate, and particularly maybe through some of the work that we could do, all of us collectively, all those who are here. And we also we're just working with UNESCO on a piece that's about to be published it's called More Than Welcome. And how do we welcome those in our communities who are not originally from our communities? In particular, those who may not have a choice to be there, such as refugees. So those are some of what we're working on now, but we're just getting started. So please, if you have research questions, please put those in chat. Please contact me. I'll be happy to take it back to the team. Things that you would love to see explored further. Oh, George, sorry.
George, you're muted.
Thank you, Peter, for noticing that. I was looking whether there are some questions in chat that I haven't seen, but I'm glad that also there are a number of people who have put their email addresses, their contacts. It's really wonderful that we get in touch with our speaker, but with everybody else on this call. And yes, what an intersection.
I just wanted to say I'm just so appreciative of this conversation we've had together. Would love to continue it. One of the ways is through the World Council on Intercultural and Global Competence. So we'd love to have you all join there. There is, as I mentioned, a working group on looking at this within the African continent. So would welcome you all to join there. And I can share this with you. So this is contact information. And here's the website for our chair, but also the website for the World Council. If you just go there and complete the really brief online form, then you'll be sent an invitation link to the platform for the World Council, which is where you'll find so many of us, and would love to connect further with you there. And also you have my contact information here, and would welcome further connections to all of you. But I do want to end with this quote that has long inspired me in this work that we all do. And it's a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. He said, "We must learn to live together. It's not an option. And it's something we have to learn. It doesn't just happen. We must learn to live together as brothers, as family, or perish together as fools." And I'm just so grateful to this community for all the work you're doing to help us learn to live together. And George, thank you so much for all that you're doing, and everyone here on this call. It's just so inspirational. Thank you all very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's our pleasure having you and everyone on the call. And as you may know, we have this kind of conversation every Wednesday for 90 minutes. And so we are looking forward to seeing you again. And maybe some people still have some questions, because really the intersections between uh, intercultural competencies and peace building is really a big question. And I can see that maybe one can lead to the other. Peace building would lead to intercultural competencies, just like also intercultural competencies could lead to peace building. I think the two really are speaking to each other very well. I had an opportunity to teach intercultural competencies to a group of university students in Germany. So I also learned a little bit about this. So when I had this topic, I'm just listening very attentively, because I'm learning a lot. And as I always do, of course, with so many other speakers, the majority are here with us today. Those who spoke to us in the past, and including, of course, the latest one, Evelyn Boyd's presentation, his professionalism. And you've heard from Peter, from Donna, and so many people are here with us. So Peter, please.
I cannot resist. You mentioned that you had been teaching, you had an opportunity to teach intercultural competence, and so you learned a lot. This is a principle that I have finally grasped after 40 years teaching Japanese martial arts. If you want to learn something, go teach it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Peter. An inspiration for sure.
Yay.
Donna, would you like to say something?
I just said it. I interrupted and I said, hooray for Peter. He's got it. That's true.
Mm-hmm. Great. Nice to see you also, Chip. And how are you, Norbert? And I also saw Friedrich. And so it's amazing. This is our beloved community, and it can't be better, for sure. Thank you so much for your time, for coming. And yeah, we can see you now, Odot. Yeah, Chip, please say something. It has been a while. Hello.
Yeah, just a probing question about one word. The word is development. And I appreciate the speaker's joyous tone in particular, because I think joy helps us develop. And it seems to me one of the questions is, we want to develop something called peace, and we want to develop some competence, and we want to develop the beloved community. But we don't know how, in a sense. And it does feel like a pipe dream, from the point of view of many of us in conflict or in struggle. We're so far away from the beloved community. So it's a lovely horizon. But how do we get from A to B? That's my question.
Yeah, and that's a question that Martin Luther King Jr. got too. And people really challenged him to say, beloved community, it's not going to happen. It's, if you're talking about everybody thriving and getting rid of poverty and hunger and war, he pushed back and said it was possible. now. So I'm still learning more about what he said and how he thought it was possible. So let's learn together. But I know that he did think that was possible. And so I'm eager to learn more, reading more of his work and others who are working on this, to see what does that look like? What can we learn?
Yeah, thank you. And I think the notion of cycling around to alternative perspectives, is so challenging because maybe even as peace seekers, we have to cycle around and embrace the warmongers, the people that are against peace. And then we have to live that contradiction.
At least seeking first to understand what brought them to that point.
Yes, excellent. Evelyn, please. You need to unmute.
I'd like to inject a slightly more positive idea. It's a bit dated, but there's a book called Empathic Civilization. I'm sure many of you have read it. And Empathic Civilization has been written by, I believe he's an economist, and he traces civilization from its origins to the time the book was written, perhaps 10, 15 years ago, and basically makes, I think, a very cogent argument that humanity, despite the conflicts, is moving towards more of an empathic civilization. And I think, absolutely, the globe appears to be in conflict right now. But if we look at any society that is in conflict and we see who is it that's driving the conflict, they are in the minority. In the majority are the people that really don't understand how they got to that point. And a lot of it is driven by a minority that has, again, this is my perspective, a minority that is driven by power and profit motive. And also we get our worldview a lot from media, which by definition is focusing on the negative. And so I believe we may be getting drawn into a pessimism or a glass half empty premise. And I believe we should start from a glass half full premise for all the activities and actions that are going on unreported and are, in fact, I believe, confirming the notion of moving towards a more empathic society. And I'll just give one example. In the Middle Ages, it was considered normal to torture people. Nowadays, it's a headline if it comes to the surface, the degree to which people are being tortured. So, but we are taking that new threshold for granted and assuming that things are moving backwards. So I throw it out as it's a statement, but it's actually a question.
Well, and Evelyn, also, Luciana put into chat another book that is hopeful, that gives us hope. It was from Steven Pinker back in 2011. It was a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined, which kind of follows what you were saying as well just now, that we still have a ways to go, but maybe humans are making a little bit of progress. And Norbert, thank you. I don't know if you would like to share more about your comment about the strong relationship between intercultural competence and peace building, traced through history, education, and marriage. But that would be wonderful to hear more about, if you would be willing to share.
Yeah, please, Norbert, if you could say something about it, that would be nice. You need to unmute your microphone. Norbert, do you hear me? Can you unmute your microphone and say a little bit about this connection?
Mute.
Please, thanks.
Happy New Year to everyone.
Thank you, the same to you.
Yes, thank you very much. And let me say that this is not my area of expertise. However, I have something to share. And my contribution to intercultural competencies in relation to peace, and I just indicated there is a strong relationship between these items. However, this can be traced through the history, especially when you trace back starting from colonialism. Some cultures, they were regarded as primitive compared to others, especially the Western one, the civilized culture. So through education system, we are trained to believe that our culture is inferior over others. But when we take an example of a family, and that's where I wanted to look at the relations within the families. Take an example of a father getting married to a wife from two different ethnic groups, each one speaking of different language. So they are united with the third language, which they both talk and interact with. So the children are likely to adopt the third language, which is spoken most by father and mother. So the chances are the languages spoken by father and the mother are likely to die. And that's why in the recent curriculum review, we are introducing the history of our cultures so that the younger generation can understand the implication. In particular, when you are relating with peace, normally ethnic groups which are united with a unified means of communication, a language, it is likely to become stable, it is likely to become peaceful. And you can take an example of Tanzania as a case, that you have different ethnic groups, more than 120, but they are united with one commonly spoken language, that is Kiswahili. So this one has built up the peaceful environment for those who interact with. I agree with the previous speaker from Zambia on the review context of the curriculum. However, I think one of the contributors said that we have a lot of unstable situation in the African continent in terms of wars. So one can go deep to look at this, especially looking at the history. You see, a country or a community speaking of a certain language is considered to be inferior over the other. And then we can take an example, for example, in Cameroon. Think they have Francophone and then we have Anglophone. You look at the two. Who is superior, who is not? So in terms of peace, this may end up having chaos. So these are my contribution. Therefore, I was reading a certain book that it is likely language, which is a unification of culture, a symbol for unification of culture. Most of languages are disappearing, they are dying. And in the context of the family, which I have told you just now, that we have father speaking one language, different from his wife, and different from the children. So the children cannot adopt the languages spoken by the parents. So the chances are for the two previous one to die and then remain with the third language, which is spoken within the family mainly. These are just my contribution. So that's why I said there is a very strong relationship between intercultural competence and peace building. And to me, I would stem on that one. Even let us not be afraid to say the truth, that we messed up somewhere when you try to read history. We were taught to believe that our cultures, our languages, very inferior. So the early adopters, they decided to put this aside and adopt the foreign language, the foreign culture. That's why nowadays we don't know where do we belong exactly. Are we traditionalists? Are we modernists? Are we civilized? Or whatever. So these are my contribution, George. I like it very much. I enjoyed it, and let me acknowledge that it is not my area of specialization, but I can contribute to this one. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much indeed, Norbert. And unfortunately, we have to stop here. I would like to ask Darla for maybe just a take home message. You can say a word or so. And I would like to thank everybody for your time. And please join us again next week. So please, Darla, for maybe a final thought.
Sure. I just want to thank each of you so much for this rich, rich conversation that we've had together today. And for me, it's been inspirational. It gives us hope. And as we move forward, I love the idea about how do we live this every day? What actions can we do every day? And the final question that I posted in chat is what does it mean for us to embrace our shared humanity? And what can we do to help others also see that we are all in this together, and how can we embrace that shared humanity? So I look forward to keeping in touch. Thank you again so much for the invitation to be with you today, and looking forward to continuing to work to build a more peaceful world together.
Thank you so much, and all the best. See you next week. Bye-bye.